Hello and welcome to InFocus with me, Curtis Sinton, on Quews News. On today's programme, I'm joined by the owner of a men's self-development and dating company, published author of the best-selling book, The Noble Art of Seduction, and political commentator Kezia Noble. And sitting next to Kezia is political commentator Nicholas Lissack. Welcome both of you to the programme. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to be here, Curtis.
There's an awful lot to get through, as always. It's politics. Every day there's a new story breaking out. I want to start today's programme with the welfare attack from the Labour government. This Labour government's been a bit more conservative probably than Labour, especially this turn of the year. Nick, I want to start with you. What do you make of the initial plans for the welfare cuts?
Well, in my view, firstly, if a Tory government did this, Labour would be up in arms. So I find it incredibly ironic that Labour is now stripping welfare away from very vulnerable people in our society. And, you know, they attempt to justify this by saying it's going to save £1.3 billion as they claim that expenditures are going to increase by 70 billion by 2029. However, that doesn't really make a lot of sense when we're cutting welfare to save 1.3 billion, yet the expenditure that we're sending to Ukraine far outweighs that. And in a way, it completely cancels out these cuts, and all this is doing is harming working people, which Labour said they were going to fight for in their general election campaign. So in my view, this is yet another example of Labour lies.
Kezia, what's your thoughts on it? Do you agree?
Yeah, so Labour are up in arms about this, actually. There's a lot of Labour supporters are not happy about seeing the cuts made to what they say is the most vulnerable in society. I don't believe that Labour are going to be taking money away from people who have very clear physical disabilities, that really can't work. Yeah. Those people are going to be looked after. But let's look at what some of these disabilities include. They actually include things that affect your day-to-day life, but not to the point where you can't work. So, one was facial scarring. So you can claim benefits and not work.
Just for facial scarring.
HIV positive with no symptoms also. So this is what they do need to look at. So it's not about if you can't work, it's if working is harder for you than the average person. And so certain types of anxiety, depression, they're putting that under mental illness. And they've shown that actually if you go and work, you go out and you socialise and talk to people, it helps you overcome those challenges.
And with working from home now, we're going to see surely more jobs being able to be people who are disabled, who potentially have to sit down and can't travel. They can sit in front of a laptop at home now.
Yes, they can do. There's so many things that you can do where you are not fully physically able to, like do certain jobs fine, but there's ones that you said you can stay in and do. But look, this is a UK phenomenon. Did you know that?
What, the cuts?
No, how much the welfare system is growing, how much it's growing. So I've put some notes here. Between 2019 and 2020, it was 36 billion it cost. 23 to 24, 48 billion. That's a huge leap. And huge. In Europe, so in Sweden, and not just Europe, in Canada, it's going down. So this is a UK phenomenon, and it's happening mainly. There's a 150% rise in under 40s.
What do you put that down to? I've
got a few theories. I think it's some things which is that people do have what they're claiming mental illnesses because they're looking at their phones all day. They're getting depressed. They're smoking cannabis. They're not going out speaking to people, so they feel bad about themselves. The best thing for those people to do would be to go out, work, and be normal, socialize. Have a normal life. Rather than sitting at home vaping, looking at through TikTok videos. It would make me go mad and depressed if I was doing that.
Yeah. Nick, you won't mind me saying, obviously you are on the lower age spectrum, obviously between 20 and 40.
Yes.
Are you seeing this in your circle? Are people, maybe not your circle, but around your age, are people staying at home more? Are people maybe using excuses more to not go to work?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I've discussed this on my social media before. Many of the people who I know are doing absolutely nothing with their lives, and it's almost a cycle of self-destruction in a way. They attempt to improve, and yet they just don't have the motivation to do so. And I find it very, very, very sad to see so many brilliant people wasting away at home, living off welfare, people who I know are truly fantastic, and yet they have fallen into the system and they are refusing to get out. And I think this is becoming an increasingly terrible issue in the West. This is almost akin to the issue of the hikikomori in Japan, of young people who effectively stay at home, play video games, do nothing and live off the welfare state. And I think the UK is at a very substantial risk of turning into a Japan-like situation. The population is aging, and young people, young people are feeling very disenfranchised with society. And quite frankly, I don't blame them. Rents are up, salaries are down, taxes are sky high.
We've let down that generation.
We really have. And I think, on another note, this is why many young people are turning to non-traditional political options such as reform, because we've seen the Conservative Party and the Labour Party over the past 20, 30 years absolutely screw over generation after generation, and we're just not willing to take it anymore. Because for every young person who has given up on life, who is willing to accept the status quo of their miserable existence, playing video games, smoking cannabis, and looking at TikTok, there are 10 more out there who want to see this country be made great again, and who actually want a future and who want to ensure that what's happened to this generation does not carry over to the next. So, I think so there's a tremendous amount of people who are experiencing, these issues. However, there are a tremendous amount of other people who are willing to fight and actually are motivated to try and change themselves.
Do you think, obviously we've got the government who's parts are playing for this in terms of, like I said, the high taxes, the high housing costs, parents. Now, like you said, people can't afford to rent, let alone buy a property at the moment. So people are staying at home until 25, 26, maybe even up to 30. Parents, why are they not pushing them to more? Why are they allowing this? Because
the parents are also on their TikTok. I'm not.
Yes,
no, this is true. Okay, so I look at parents giving their children, young as 2 years old, in their prams, in their buggies. Now, when we were younger, they told us, you just look around. Yeah. They give it to them immediately, a little smartphone, and then I look at the mums, and they're looking at their smartphone. So it's really because they're also caught up looking at their phones. That's why they give them
an easy solution for them
just
to
play a video game, watch TikTok, do whatever it is that you need to do because mummy needs to scroll also a little bit. I think it's a lot of that.
It's laziness. And in a way it can be classed as neglect, because it's shown that giving children access to tablets and technology at such a young age, it greatly impacts upon their developmental growth.
I made that mistake. So I have a 9-year-old and I was on holiday. I gave him my old phone. Yeah. And I said, okay, you can have that for an hour whilst I'm sunbathing. And he became addicted with the 1 hour, set up a Snapchat, was putting pictures up of himself, pictures up of me, talking with men. I was like, in 1 hour, this has happened. I'll never do that again.
That's nuts.
But that's happening. All my friends who have children, they're not taking them to parks. They're just taking them back home, putting them on video games and letting them talk to each other. And these are young boys that have, a lot of energy, that need to be out, falling down, getting injured a little bit, getting in the mud. Yeah. Enjoying life.
But they're not.
They're not. And it's just a continuation. Yeah. I have nieces who are teenagers. I'm like, what are you doing slobbing around the house on a Saturday night and Sunday? Why are you not out doing something? And it's half like looking at TikTok, vaping. It's bizarre. It's a very bizarre reality.
It is.
But I think Generation Alpha are going to be different. They're already showing a different kind of attitude to Generation Z.
I mean, they're using the social media for different purposes already, let alone not just to consume content. They're probably putting out more than what Gen Z did in terms of information. Gen Z danced in front of a screen. Gen Alpha are putting more political stuff out there. I think Nigel Farage is huge upon Gen Alpha, but this is because of TikTok and social media. It's a good way for them to consume that. If that's how they understand politics, if that's how they get into the world of
bite
politics.
size.
That's the thing. It's in
needs some
moderation.
context. They do need to understand develop that a little bit further. But there's a silver lining and all that.
Yeah, but I mean, one positive doesn't make the whole situation brilliant. And in my view, this has been exacerbated by COVID. A lot of people over COVID effectively lost hope in a way. They lost hope. They lost themselves. And so they got lazy. They got very, very, very lazy. And I think we've seen an entire reconstitution of what it means to be a parent in the modern age as a result of COVID.
Yeah.
Being cooped up, locked up together, not having any space.
I took him out every day for long walks. I didn't obey it personally, but I saw other people with their kids waving at us behind, glass windows. Yeah. They saw me and my son walking in the sunshine. Yeah, it's pathetic, making their rainbow pictures.
And we know, if the police watch this, we know they can't come after you.
They couldn't come
now
after
gone
me.
past the, well, now.
No, but even then they couldn't, because I just said, I'm doing my 1 hour.
They wouldn't know, of course.
I had a child.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So
Both of you, it might be one of the first times since he became Prime Minister, you've agreed with Sir Keir Starmer on this. He says that the current system's unsustainable, indefensible and unfair, stressing that the economic and moral imperatives demand change. Why is he doing this, do you think? Why is he agreed for some of this? Because it's not a Labour policy. Do you think it's an opportunity that for him to try and get, with what's going on, we'll talk about it later, but with what's going on with the reform at the moment, is it a prime opportunity for him to get some voters on side?
Well, we've seen Keir Starmer steal reforms policies almost verbatim in the past. So, yes, I do think he is extremely threatened by reform's rise in the polls. In spite of the recent controversy involving Rupert Lowe, we've actually gone up 1 point in polls, and reform itself is on track to win the Runcorn by-election that's coming up. I believe a recent poll put reform at 40 to Labour's 34. And so I think Starmer is certainly trying to pivot more towards the centre. He knows. He's a clever guy. He's a very clever guy. Lots of people on Twitter think he's an idiot. No, he's actually very clever. He's very shrewd. And he knows that reform is primarily going for socially conservative Northerners, probably people who typically voted Labour on economics. And so he is attempting to sort of undercut that support by going for more, how may I say this, centrist, traditionally liberal Democrat, maybe even Tory voters in a way. That is why he has pledged to cut down on immigration. That is why he's now instituting these cuts. He's trying to expand his Big Tent coalition because the actual radical leftists in the Labour Party, they do not like Keir Starmer. They will never, ever, ever like him. And I think he has started to realise that his position isn't exactly the best at the moment. So he's trying to expand his coalition. He wants a big, broad house, and that's why he's doing this. But he is completely stealing reforms policies, completely. It's actually, this government has no shame, quite frankly.
And the reform MPs are calling him out on it. And yes. I think they're right to do so as well.
Yes, exactly. No. The reform MPs are completely right to call the government out on this. But we know this government is not going to change. He's not going to change anything whatsoever. He's going to continue to steal our policies. But the thing is, voters are smart. Voters have realised that Keir Starmer is not to be trusted because he's gone back on so much of what he said. No tax rises. Oh, well, that was... What a
freezing council tax, and it's about to go up.
Exactly. So I think voters realise that Labour is not to be trusted. And no matter how desperate Starmer becomes on trying to steal policies from other parties, voters are realising that the two-party establishment, the two-party duopoly, Labour and the Tories, cannot be trusted. And so they're going to continue to turn to alternatives like reform. And we're even seeing a shift towards the Liberal Democrats at certain points.
God forbid.
With Davey at the helm. Kezia, Nick touched upon it there. He's not popular within his own party from the left side. MPs like Richard Burgon and Nadia Whittome isn't liking these welfare cuts. They're saying that they are concerned because usually what happens is those most vulnerable get affected. Could this spark a revolution within Labour if this goes further than it needs to?
Could it spark a revolution? I don't think it will come to that. No. But Nick did also say that Keir Starmer is no fool. He's a smart man. He might sound like an idiot, but he's not. And they have looked at this Labour, Keir Starmer and his inner circle, and said, this is unsustainable. Mm-hmm. This is unsustainable. And yes, they are stealing reforms policies. I agree with this. Look, I hate to say this, but I'm with Labour on this. And I am not a Labour. I've never voted Labour. I'm a reform voter. Okay, my faith in them has been slightly challenged. It's not as blind as it was maybe a few weeks ago. But, I will still vote for them. But I'm saying as a reform voter, I like this, what Labour are doing. I agree with it.
And do you think it's actually going to materialise? Do you think it's actually going to become effective?
Probably not.
and that's the thing. People will see that as being pessimistic, but it's not. That's just based on what they do. That's based on what they've done thus far.
Exactly. Considering this government's track record, decent idea, horrendous execution, probably complete failure in the end. Totally.
It's nice on the tongue. It's nice on the news, right? You're going to cut welfare because you're going to save money, put it back to British people. We're going to talk about now the NHS England abolishment. Something that was announced this week, around about 9,000 jobs are going to be cut, and the money is supposedly going to go on the frontline healthcare. Now, in the gist of it, all of us sitting here, we can't argue that frontline healthcare in this country needs to be improved. More funding needs to be put there in the right places because obviously it's being mismanaged, clearly. Do you, first and foremost, the first question, Kezia, I'll ask you this. Do you think that abolishing NHS England, bringing it back under government control is the right thing to do?
Yes.
Nick?
I completely agree.
Kezia, I'll let you. What's the reason for you first? Why do you think so?
Why do I think that? Because right now they've got two office of what do you call it? Sorry, they've got two in charge.
NHS England.
Yes, they've got two. That's already the first thing that they're getting rid of. It's not working right now, and it hasn't been working for a long time. So it does need a reform. It does need a change. So I believe that this is going to be, anything's better now than anything.
Nick?
The system is fundamentally broken. The NHS is in ruins. Attlee's dream of an efficient government-run healthcare service is in tatters. And in my view, this is a very, very, very effective means of cutting waste, cutting bureaucracy, and actually being able to make the healthcare system far more efficient. However, I will say this, I feel extremely, extremely, extremely sorry for the 9,000 people who are going to lose their jobs. Labour has a habit of, through these cuts, lead to more unemployment, and as a result, a bigger strain on the welfare system in total. So, in a way, these Labour policies sound absolutely wonderful. They sound really amazing. Cutting waste, cutting bureaucracy. However, going back to the welfare issue, you're about to put 9,000 people out of work, most of whom will probably end up back on the welfare system. And we're cutting welfare. Yeah. So in a way, the wheels will keep on turning. These problems will only get worse. And, 9,000, that is a low estimate. In fact, some people have stated that it's going to be around 20 to 40,000 in total once all the cuts have come into effect. And so, considering how the welfare state is effectively failing at this point, I mean, the country's going to heck in a handbasket. How exactly is this system going to be able to accommodate potentially tens of thousands of NHS workers who are now going to be unemployed? We need to reform the healthcare service, but I'm not entirely sure whether laying off thousands of people is the right way to go about it.
Bringing it back under government control and having those people in place, that could have been an option for them to look at. Obviously, the main thing is that
it's this government that's in charge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm saying this, but I'm saying it in a way that I would like it to be under government control, but not this government.
This government doing it.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Why though? What's your reason?
We've been speaking Labour, they're incompetent. And the Tories were incompetent also.
Yeah.
Actually, they weren't incompetent. They wanted mass immigration. They wanted to speed it up, and they did a very good job of it. They're not incompetent when they have to be.
Well, as Starmer said, the immigration side of things was by design.
Yes, no, it was. With Tories, it was by design, and it was legal immigration.
Yeah, legal. Whereas now it's changed slightly. Bring it back to the NHS.
Well, it's part of it, by the way. Immigration and the NHS is part of it.
Costs are going up.
We've got an ageing population, which is kind of like a good problem to have.
Yep.
But we're also flooding a lot of older people from other countries. They're not all just young working men.
They're bringing in different generations.
They're bringing in grandma, they're bringing in and all sorts of diabetes and things within certain communities, which are unhealthier, actually. And these are my friends who come from those communities who have said there's more diabetes in certain communities, and they're coming with their older relatives here and putting a lot of pressure. So we can't just isolate that. Immigration is affecting everything. It is making everything worse.
Completely agree. Not to mention the fact...
we can't isolate it. Sorry.
Exactly. Not to mention the fact the NHS is now actually having to spend a considerable amount of money on hiring translators because a lot of these foreign people, when they come to this country, they don't bother to assimilate. They don't bother to learn the language. And so you have people speaking whatever tongue they entered the country with in an English hospital. It's absolutely ridiculous. And that in itself puts a strain on the health system. Mass immigration is quite frankly unsustainable at this current rate in every conceivable respect. And I agree. I completely agree. Everything links back to mass migration. Everything links back to mass migration. Our welfare system issues, the issues of the NHS, the strain our country's bureaucracy is under. Prisons, exactly. Everything. And everything links back to mass migration.
Yeah,
everything.
100%. We're seeing from the same hymn sheet here.
Yeah.
100%. You can't isolate. You can't say, well, let's go back and talk about... No, it's connected.
And they will know this. So why are they not trying to fix the cause? Why are they slapping plasters left, right and centre on things that just repairing things temporarily, but immigration is then going to affect something else? So why are they doing that?
Because they want to lower our standards of living. They want us to have third world goals, okay? Because if you think about it, in the 1990s, when I was growing up, you knew that if you worked hard, you'd be able to afford your own home. Might not be a palace, but it would be okay. It would be in London somewhere, and you could have 2 or 3 children, a garden, and a car.
Yeah.
It was not a dream. It was like
It was an achievable lifestyle.
Yeah. But now people have a goal to like live in a shoebox in the middle of nowhere somewhere. And they think, yeah, I'm winning. And that's what immigration has done. It's lowered our standards. If you look at what's acceptable now, was not acceptable, like the way that people behave in the street, the way that you have people, and they are not all immigrants, but most of them just on these scooters going along up and down on pavements. If you look at videos, so I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I'll keep to this. If you look at videos of like Karachi or Delhi or places like that, it's very interesting. You've got all these like women, children, men in a marketplace buying whatever it is they're buying, and going interweaving in and out are men on scooters, and no one's batting an eyelid. It's just, this is normal. It's not normal here, but we've made it normal. So everything's been lowered. All our expectations have been lowered because I believe that the government think we cannot provide what the boomers provided. We can't provide them that kind of cheap housing anymore. They could have, but then after Blair, because so many came
Too much
in,
has happened.
so now we all have very, very similar kind of third world goals.
So sticking to this,
It's a theory. I can't prove it.
yeah.
But
I mean, I don't necessarily agree that that was an intentional decision on part of the government to lower our living standards. However, I would say that this is the unintended consequence of mass migration. As it, let's face it, for companies, it is infinitely more economically advantageous to hire cheap foreign labour over expensive British labour.
Yeah.
And so, this is, increased globalization is pushing us towards opening our borders and, let floodgates, let anybody come into this country and work for, cheap. And this is effectively what's happened. I mean, it worked brilliantly in the short term. However, the problem is that we're now letting any Tom, Dick and Harry come into Britain, and most of these people, they don't work anymore. They come here, they live off the welfare state. In fact, I think it's an absolute disgrace that the taxpayer is forced to foot the bill for migrant hotels. These people are not actual migrants. They're not fleeing war and persecution. No. They are economic migrants. They're coming here for the economic benefits of Britain. And in a way, our almost open border policy is facilitating that. The fact that we, over decades, have effectively enshrined mass migration into the concept of the state, sort of evolution of the state, that has unintentionally lowered everyone else's standards of living. And in a way, in my view, this is actually one of the reasons why young people are increasingly turning to parties like Reform UK, because they have been priced out of the major cities. There are limited economic opportunities at home because a tremendous amount of immigrants have taken up low-skilled, low-paying labour. And as a result, these kids are sick of it. They're sick of growing up in a community that is fundamentally damaged by decades of mass migration. They want to change. And I'm not here saying that we should cut all immigration, because I myself was an immigrant. I lived in Spain for 6 years. I simply think that it has to be frozen at a very specific figure, at a low figure per year, because we can't have 700,000 plus people coming into this country every year when we have a lack of housing. There is a finite space in this country. Britain is full.
And most of these are men, and it's affecting my quality of life.
Yeah. Because they're putting them in your streets.
So I live in probably one of the best parts of London. So I was in a bubble for a long time.
Yeah.
But now it's got into that bubble.
It's coming through.
It's poisoned through. It's burst that bubble. So, for instance, I used to go for a walk in this local park before I used to pick up my child from school. I won't go in there anymore. There's men loitering, and they are all migrants, 100%. And they're loitering, and they're coming up to me, and they're unhinged, and they're frightening me. Now, I can't imagine what they're doing to younger women.
Yeah.
So I don't go into that park. So then I started finding other places to go, and I was like, going to the library of my kid. They are loitering in the library. I don't know what to do. But they can't get thrown out of the library because they're not actually committing a crime. Because I said, these men are just loitering here amongst kids and things. So, by the way, again, I have to make this point very clear. I live in one of the best boroughs of London. People are paying a lot of money to live in this borough, and it's now burst. It's not just like, it's in that kind of part of London or the rundown part of this town.
Yeah.
It's in there because they're getting housed in all the hotels in that area, and they're just walking around and just being intrusive. And I have to say, just up to no good.
Yeah.
That Phil.
Well, I mean,
So my quality of life has deteriorated
because of them,
and that's why I'm moving out of London.
And you've had no option but that.
I was born in this city. I grew up here. And I always thought I was going to live in this city. I actually have the money to live in the city, but I thought this is no way to bring up a child anymore.
We're seeing this week footage on social media being shared around of areas in Birmingham of it just being utter trash.
Yeah.
It's
all these takeaways, apparently. These takeaways packaging and things. What's happening here? This is not the country I grew up in.
It's not great.
It's a state.
Everywhere I go, I see filth. I see discarded needles. I see plastic bottles on the street. I see newspapers strewn everywhere. Half-eaten curry and chips, you know, from the local takeaway the night before. Everywhere I go, I just see filth all across our streets.
And we live in nice areas, me and you.
Yes.
So this is what you can't run away from. You can't say, I'll live in Mayfair and I won't have to see it. It's in Mayfair too. Yeah. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. And
Burst all the bubbles.
I don't understand how anybody could be happy with the status quo.
And they're not now, though, right? This is why within the space of 8-9 months since the last election, Reform have gone from 12 points to 26, 20 in the polls. They are going up.
I come from a family which are Lib Dem lovies. They're living in their major bubble. You know, they read The Guardian. They won't watch anything that I'm in. They don't want it. They said, when I told them I'm voting for Reform, they said, we don't want to give this oxygen, this conversation. I come from that elite kind of, you know.
Okay. They seem very supportive.
But you know what they said? You know what they said now? Reform are going to win.
Yeah.
That's the first thing they said. And then I asked them, why did you think that? And they said, because we've got this Afghan family that have suddenly moved in down the road. And then there's this other Afghan family. And I said, it's affecting you and your two daughters now, huh? They have to walk back from school. When it affects you personally, then you start waking up and realizing why people are turning to.
And the issue is when you start realizing it, it's always too late, right? It's always too late because it's there. It now means that the U-turn that needs to be made is substantially more. So
incremental steps, we're getting there.
They close the border tomorrow, for example. They then have to deport. That's what's going to happen, right? They're going to have to close the borders completely to start with and then deport.
Yes, they have to.
And then put an immigration plan in place where we allow skilled professional workers who will add to this economy, to this country.
On temporary visas, for heaven's sake. What is wrong with temporary work visas? What's wrong with it?
It works exceptionally well in Germany during the 1960s. Exceptionally well.
In Dubai, if you lose your job, you've got 30 days, or I want to say 30 days.
I think it's less than that.
It's less than that. I think it's only around 2 weeks now.
Otherwise, your bank accounts get frozen and everything. You have to
go to prison if your money starts going like you owe money.
Yeah,
you go in debt. I think they can put you in prison for that. I think so. About 10 years ago, I know that was the case. It might have changed.
I want to come back to the NHS just to round up on that. No. Immigration is always a topic, but then it links to everything.
Everything.
It affects everything.
It's the root cause.
Wes Streeting was surprised by the announcement of the abolishment of the NHS England. The Health Secretary, you thought, would have been briefed in detail as to why this was the case, and surely he'd have been on board, especially in public.
Well, exactly. This is why this Labour government is a complete and utter car crash. It seems that decisions are taken on a completely ad hoc basis. Nobody knows what the hell is going on. I wouldn't be surprised if Keir Starmer is effectively governing through a few aides of his, as we know that he, I'm sure after the recent controversies, he has sort of slinked back into his shell and he's only governing through people who he trusts. You know, I don't understand how anybody, Labour is still polling at around 24-25%. I don't understand how anybody could vote for a party where the health secretary isn't informed about a massive overhaul to the NHS, which, by the way, he is responsible for. Yeah. I don't understand. It's insane. And this is yet another example of this government just being, a complete and utter disaster. You know, these people give the Tories a run for their money in terms of sheer incompetence.
At least it took 14 years. It took 14 years for the Tories to get to this stage.
It was taken only a few months for Labour, quite frankly. I mean, it's astounding. Starmer deserves a gold medal and a pie in the face for what he's managed to do. I mean, honestly.
I think people are still voting for Labour because the mantra was so strong. That messaging was so strong. Vote Labour, save the NHS. Yeah. Vote Labour, save the NHS. It's like almost hypnosis. And I had a client recently, a student, and we got into politics a little bit, which I don't usually do. And he said, I voted Labour this time. I usually vote Conservatives. He voted same thing, basically, the uni party. And I said, why? He goes, to save the NHS. And that was it. And I said, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It was like he just parroted what he'd heard, to save the NHS. You know, like you're in a trance.
I wonder how that's going to go in the next election. I wonder whether or not they're going to actually be able to bank on
Labour
that.
are going to fix it. You know what the solution is? We bring in more people. Bring in an extra 2 million people. That's a solution to everything.
Well,
That will fix the NHS.
the savings.
I'm
from-
joking,
from
guys. I'm
these,
being sarcastic.
from these job cuts, hundreds of millions, supposedly. Wes Streeting saying that, citing £100 million as a starting figure, even the lowest pay grade of just over 23,000 and cutting 9,300 jobs as they're expected to do will save at least £219 million a year.
But what about health tourism? That's 300 million a year that's costing. Why don't they stop health tourism?
Put it on insurance basis. Do you think that would be the most sensible thing to do?
Well, save 300 million.
Which is 81 million more than what they're saving currently on the lowest
Here
pay
you
grade.
go. Problem solved. Next. You know, like, I'm not a
migrants benefit
politician.
from
I'm
that.
coming up with better
Yeah.
ideas.
Do you think it's going to work long term? Do you think you touched on it then? 2029, the election, NHS is going to be a huge thing because Labour, so early in their tenure, by the way, have we've got over 4 years to go. Have promised to reform the NHS. We'd like to see some big work done by 2029. Nick, I'll start with you. Do you think that work is going to be visible, or do you think it's going to be they're dying on the hill?
No, absolutely not. It's not going to be visible. The NHS is still going to be in an absolutely atrocious state. Nothing is going to fundamentally change, and so voters are going to shift to other options like reform. And no doubt the pendulum will also swift, and the Tories will probably make gains as well. As people, I notice that people always vote against the current thing. They always vote against who's in power. Like, for example, in 2020, they voted against, Americans came out in droves to vote against Donald Trump. Yeah. And the pendulum shifted. Biden did an absolutely atrocious job, and then they came out and they voted for him in droves. So I think by 2029, we're going to see the pendulum shift yet again. The electorate is going to become infinitely more right-wing. Reform is going to surge. The Tories are going to make small gains, and Labour is going to be absolutely annihilated. In fact, I think that it will be comparable to what happened in the recent German election. I think it will be comparable to that.
Reform on a part of the AfD.
I think yes. Honestly, I do think so. I think it will be comparable to that. Quite frankly, I think both of the right-wing parties are going to make extensive gains in the country, and I think Starmer is going to be utterly humiliated because, as we established earlier, yes, the propaganda was very intense, but a lot of young people who, might I add, supported reform from the sidelines this election because they couldn't vote, they're going to be able to vote next time, and they're going to be voting turquoise because they are sick to death of the establishment making promises they know they can't keep and continuing to drag this country into the dirt.
You said two right-wing parties. What was the other right-wing party?
You know what I mean.
Right, yes, okay. Just want to double check that.
Kezia, do you think Labour are going to be able to evidently show we have improved the NHS in the past?
No, because they're going to let in more migrants. So no, it goes back to that. They're just going to let in more pressure. There's going to be more pressure on the NHS. There's pressure on everything. There's going to be more pressure, more demand on NHS. And I would just say, I really hope that, yes, reform do get in, but have you thought about the migrants who are going to be allowed to vote?
By that point.
And how many people they're going to be flooding in? Because I'm telling you, it's millions.
Well, they were talking this week about allowing them to work in this country whilst they're here. But as soon as you work, you then get rights. Once you're contributing to the society, and I agree, if you come into this country and you contribute to society, you should have rights, maybe on a working visa, but you should have some sort of rights. But now, if you give them even temporarily working positions, you're giving them rights. You're giving them free healthcare. What they get.
But it's even people on the right wing are supposedly saying, make sure that they're working whilst they're here. I'm like, no, don't do that. Just, they got to go. They got to go. So that's something to worry about because they will, mark my words, allow in millions and millions of more people. And if they'll let them vote, they're not going to vote reform, those ones.
Well, I know they won't, but I personally believe that, and this is not coming from just me as simply a reform perspective, but this is coming from an objective standpoint. I believe that there will be more young people than these people at the polling booths. I think that young people in particular are increasingly mobilized by the state of society, the sheer destruction on both an economic and social level that we have seen over the past couple of decades under both the Labour and the Tories. And so, in my view, it doesn't really matter. I think that reform will surge to victory in 2029. I pray they do. I really pray they do. Because in my view, this is the only hope we have to save this country, because Reform's policies are bold, they're new, and you know what? They're very attractive. They are extremely attractive. This is a populist movement that's going to be effectively guided by Gen Z, by this next generation. And look, I may as well say this. I have absolutely zero issue with anybody who wants to come into this country and work for a living. But the thing that I have a problem with is the sheer extent of the numbers.
Yeah.
We need a very, very, very strictly enforced cap. Very low cap as well, because as I said earlier, 700,000 plus a year is not sustainable. And not all of these people are doctors and lawyers. You know, if they were, sure, brilliant, fantastic, but they're not.
If they were, we wouldn't be waiting 4 months for a GP appointment.
Yes, exactly. And so the whole argument that immigration is going to save the NHS is sort of moot, because the vast majority of people coming into this country are not trained doctors. If anything, it's just putting more of a strain on the NHS. And it makes me wonder whether or not in the long run, considering what Kezia has pointed out with mass migration, whether getting rid of NHS England is actually going to be a net positive, as you're effectively cutting 9,000 jobs. Those are 9,000 people who could help, keep the NHS even slightly efficient. So I think in the pursuit of efficiency, the government may have shot itself in the foot.
Reform. We've spoken a lot about it. There's been a bit of a rift, should we say, within the party.
Really? I didn't know.
Nick, I'm going to ask you initially, your followers will know your take, those who support and don't support your take. For the audience at home, your take on what's happened with Rupert Lowe.
Well, I'm standing by Nigel and the party. I think the party has every right to investigate the accusations brought against Rupert Lowe. As, let's face it, if we didn't, the media would quite frankly crucify the party, and so would Labour and the Tories. For example, say a Labour MP or a Labour minister was accused of bullying and threatening the chairman of the Labour Party, and they didn't choose to investigate. Labour would be absolutely slaughtered by our side, and, I couldn't blame them, quite frankly. And so I think it is incredibly important, since Reform is a government in waiting. We're not a protest party, as Mr. Lowe claims. We are a government in waiting, and a very professional party at that we prove to the public that, yes, we are professional. Yes, we are taking these accusations very seriously. Yes, we are going to investigate. We do have procedures in place. And ultimately, I think a lot of people are starting to come round to that way of thinking. I mean, Lowe is maybe popular on Twitter. However, I believe a recent poll showed that only 14% of Brits actually recognised him or knew who he was. In fact, 3% of them thought he was the late Sir David Amos. And that includes 71% of Reform voters. 71% of Reform voters have absolutely no idea who Rupert Lowe is. And it just goes to show that Twitter isn't real life. And I think what we're seeing right now, Rupert Lowe is going to become the next Ben Habib. When Ben Habib left Reform, you had all the same people who are now whinging about Rupert Lowe, saying, oh my God, Reform is over, Reform is over. Reform didn't end when Ben Habib left, and it's certainly not going to end if Rupert Lowe doesn't come back to the party. But I will make things abundantly clear. If he is cleared on everything, should he be allowed back in? Probably. Sure. I mean, if he wants to come back at that point.
Do you think that if it had stopped, Kezia, we'll get your idea on this in a moment, but do you think if it had stopped with they announced he is suspended, because that is the practical party protocol, regardless of the party, like you say, if they didn't do that, they would have been attacked from the left, from the centre with Conservatives, and obviously the Liberal Democrats. Do you think that too much has happened now publicly? If he'd stayed quiet and accepted it, said, I'm innocent and I will plead that and I will fully cooperate with this investigation, and it ended there, and then he was found not guilty or not to have done anything wrong, he then could have been welcomed back. But do you think too much has been said publicly?
Honestly, yes. I think what I said earlier about him potentially coming back to the party, that was more of a pipe dream in a way. He has effectively cut and run from Reform at this point.
Would you like to see him back in the party?
Well,
from a personal perspective.
From a personal perspective, don't get me wrong, I like Rupert. I think some of what he tweets is actually very good. However, at the same time, looking at everything he said about the party, the extent of the allegations made against him, and also just the general unprofessionalness that he has displayed on Twitter over the last week, I'm really not entirely sure at this point. It's a difficult question. It's a very, very, very difficult question, because I understand that many people on Twitter absolutely love Rupert because of his hardline stance.
Yes, like me.
If you really look at it, though, the fact that only 14% of Brits actually knew who he was, that just shows that Twitter isn't real life. And in my view, this is all a storm in a teacup. And it's looking likely that Reform is going to be back to 5 MPs relatively soon anyways, as we have the Runcorn by-election to contend, and Reform is currently polling extremely well. And so this is certainly not the end of Reform. Reform will survive irrespective of whether Rupert Lowe is a part of the party or not. Because Reform is a movement about the people. It's not about one man. Everybody on Twitter saying, oh my God, Reform is over, Rupert Lowe was Reform. Well, no, it's not. Rupert Lowe is not Reform, and Reform is not Rupert Lowe. Yeah. Reform is all of us. Reform are the 200,000 plus people who are in this party who want to make a change for the better. Reform are the 4.1 million people who voted for our party at the general election. And I think to almost create a sort of cult of personality around one man, with claims that, oh my God, he's gone, so the party is over. That's not the case. Reform is still doing very well. There are still so many wonderful, amazing people who are going out and campaigning every single day, showing so much enthusiasm, and in my view, this will all blow over. In a couple of months' time, this will be a long-forgotten memory.
Well, they've got the rally in just under 2 weeks' time,
yes,
which is a huge moment for the party. Kezia, I want to get your views on it, because you're a bit different on the fence with this.
So, I think you're right. It is a bit of a storm in a Twitter teacup, a little bit. And there are a lot of people out there who are not on Twitter who are like, they don't know who this guy even is. Yeah. But let's address the elephant in the room, which is people are frustrated that Nigel Farage is now saying things that we don't like to hear. Like things about not deporting people, telling people, supposedly, allegedly, people in his party don't mention deportations too much. Yeah. This is something, and you feel just as passionate as me about immigration, that has made us turn to Rupert Lowe, because he's at least making the right noises, at the very least. So how would you respond to that?
Well, firstly, I have not been told anything like that until I've been given, everybody I've spoken to has been given carte blanche to say and do as they please, really. So I think that report is, quite frankly, a load of nonsense.
I said allegedly.
Yes. I mean, we are seeing the likes of Ben Habib doing the press circuit at the moment on a Nigel Farage trashing tour.
Yes, I do find it very ironic how all the people who support Lowe are claiming that Nigel Farage is part of the Uniparty, yet guess who's been going on all of the Uniparty networks? All of Farage's biggest detractors who were formerly in the
are they in Rupert Lowe supporters?
Only because they're getting the opportunity to do that.
Are they Rupert Lowe supporters, though, or are they anti-Nigel Farage for whatever reason?
I think it's a bit of both, quite frankly. I know for a fact that many people who publicly claim to have cancelled their Reform memberships were never Reform members in the first place, and they're simply they're simply going on to a Twitter trend to try and get likes and impressions. And you know what? It works, and it's worked very well for some of these people. But also,
but go back to my point. Has he been more quiet, let's say less vocal, Nigel Farage, about deportation? Because I've noticed he has been.
Sorry, just to touch on that, I saw a post from Nigel, I think as recent as yesterday, where he actually spoke about deportations.
Okay, so it's back on the... okay, fine, it's back in the conversation. But there was a time when we started not hearing so much. I mean, Nick would be able to
answer that probably better than me.
No. There was no... He's always been pretty consistent. Okay. I mean, if you watch the rallies, he talks about deportation. The only thing that differs, that's the difference between him and Rupert, is simply the fact that Rupert adds mass onto the front of that. He simply talks about deporting foreign criminals, and Reform is the only party that's actually going to deport foreign criminals in this country.
Which is why I'm going to vote Reform. So what they've done to Rupert Lowe, I'm upset about, because I really liked what he had to say for the reasons that I've expressed.
Yeah.
But yes, it's the only... people have to understand this is the only solution. This is the only alternative. So yes, it's... Agree with me, fine, that Rupert Lowe, he shouldn't go. He was a great asset. But come on, we've got to get back together, unite, get this party, get the uni party out.
I think one thing I will give credit to Reform is that they actually showed the ticker going down when people did, because some people did resign
quite transparent.
But I believe that they ended up with more members than they
the
had
ticker
prior.
has gone up. The ticker has gone
That's
up
good.
now.
Look, ultimately, I'm not going to sit here and say, right now we must punish Reform Party because that's self-destructive. I care about my future. I want to see them in power, but they're not above scrutiny. Okay, so people, I think this is good. Look, they're mavericks.
But is
Some of
that
them,
not an
they're
example-
mavericks. The MPs.
Is that not an example of what they've done, though? They're not above scrutiny. They know that. That's why they suspended Rupert Lowe, because no matter whether they believe the allegations or not, obviously one was Zia Youssef, the party chairman, so they would know that as fact or fiction. They're not above scrutiny, so they suspend an MP, they lose the whip, the MP is an independent MP, pending an investigation.
Yes, but I meant they're not
By the public.
by the public.
Yeah,
Yes,
of course.
by our supporters. So, look, I don't have blind faith in them, okay? But I do.
But you did.
I did. And it's been tarnished a little bit. But I will still vote for them, and I still encourage other people to vote for them. I'm saying that it shouldn't be like, oh, it's so precious, we can't criticise it or hold it to account, the party.
But it shows...
Because then they will carry on making good decisions, better decisions, because they know that they're going to get that kickback. This is democracy in action. It's fantastic.
I think you said it right in terms of with what happened was it was on X. Media took this as an opportunity that the
It was on
mainstream media
Facebook
took
too,
it
by
as,
the way.
Okay, it's on
No,
social
but
media.
there's a lot of numbers on Facebook, a lot of boomers, they're still talking there, and a lot of people who vote Reform. I know there's a lot of young people coming through, but essentially a lot of them are still older people. And I watched on Facebook them getting outraged also. So it's not just a Twitter storm.
I want to talk about Rupert Lowe specifically. Tories have been on the press this week talking about welcoming him to the party. They would happily welcome Rupert Lowe to their party. Now, if he's found guilty of what they've done, surely this is a bit too early. If he gets found not guilty and he's an independent, I'd fully go if the Conservatives believe he's an asset, then add him to your team. But they don't know yet if he's guilty or not.
Precisely. But I mean, Rupert Lowe has a history of, dare I say, communicating with the Tories in an unsanctioned manner. I mean, let's go back to the Dudley North election in 2019, where he withdrew his candidacy about 30 minutes before paperwork had to be submitted, after he was in secret communications with the Tory party for quite a while. So, in my view, it's, I think it would be a negative for the Conservative Party ultimately if they were to bring him on board. And in a way, it would actually be very bad for Rupert Lowe, because he would be seen to be joining, effectively, the Uni Party. Because everyone on Twitter was like, oh my God, Rupert is this absolute maverick Chad who is standing up against the establishment. Well, if he joins the Tory Party, he is the establishment. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing this whole time. And, Rupert has been willing to compromise with the Tories before, as I pointed out with Dudley North, which Nigel Farage was absolutely disgusted and shocked by at the time. And quite frankly, rightly so. Rupert did sell Reform at the time, the Brexit Party down the river. So for all these people online who think Rupert is some sort of maverick, pay attention to his history. If anything, he's a bit more of a kind of like a Robert Jenrick-like opportunist in a way. He's seen what sells, and he is going to market himself in that respect. Though, ultimately, I don't think he will join the Conservative Party. I've heard that Rupert's original plan was to simply serve one term, then leave Parliament anyways in 2029, and that's looking more likely than ever. I can't look, allegedly, that's what I've heard on the grapevine. So
He's 74?
I think he's 67.
67.
I think he's 67. So in my view, this is how I see it going. I think he will sit as an independent, irrespective of whether or not he gets found guilty or not, and then he will leave Parliament in 2029. I think that's how it's going to go. But I mean, like I said, I'd heard on the grapevine that he allegedly was planning on doing one term anyways, and he was going to leave.
I mean, you've just answered my next question. My next question would have been, where does Rupert Lowe go from here at the next election? But if he is standing down, then obviously it's...
It's bad either way. If he goes to Conservative, they're just going to swallow him up, and then because they also want mass immigration to carry on. But if he starts up his own party, then he's going to take away potential voters from Reform.
That's the other issue as well.
I just want him to go back to Reform.
He called people not to... When it first happened, he called people not to leave the party.
Yes, but here's the interesting thing. After he did that, he unfollowed a bunch of people who publicly supported the party, including yours truly, which is very interesting, saying one thing and doing the other. It's remarkably interesting. So ultimately, I don't think he's going to be coming back to Reform, and everybody on Twitter...
It's a shame. It's a big shame. It's a big mistake.
At the moment, yes.
So England's going to lose, Britain, is going to lose a good MP. Either way, so either he's going to start up his own party that would potentially take away voters from reform. Maybe not a lot, but
I don't think he will start up his own
so
party.
if he goes to Conservative, they're going to swallow him up. He's going to have.
But if he is leaving in 2029, he's only got 400.
Well, I heard this a very long time
Of course,
ago.
yeah.
I mean,
it could be very different.
Look, it could be very different now, but that's what I heard a long time ago.
We've got a lot of respect for Rupert Lowe. He was the one who didn't. He gave it to charity, didn't he?
He gives his salary to charity each
Come
month.
on, this is.
Look, and I'm not going to lie.
genuinely-
I do have respect for that. I have tweeted before how brilliant it is that he actually is donating his salary to charity, and I think more MPs should do that. However, the party has an obligation to investigate these accusations of bullying levied against him, and quite frankly, more seriously, the claims that he allegedly threatened the life of the chairman, Zia Youssef. And from bitter personal experience, as somebody who has received threats, the police don't investigate unless there is something there.
credible.
No, that's not true. I mean, come on. The police investigate an angry tweet now.
Not really. I mean, I once had
Well,
somebody.
they do. They literally put people in prison because of angry tweets.
Well, it's not. I mean,
so they do investigate a lot of nonsense also.
Well, yes,
we
but
know that they do.
Well, yes, but at the same time, I recently had a lovely guy who found my phone number, threatened to kill me. But I then found, he texted me on his actual phone, sent that all to the police, and they refused to investigate.
Yes, because we know there's two-tier policing. They probably seen your account, don't like what you have to say, can't be bothered with you, they're not interested. This is perfect for them. The police get called in. Oh, we've got a problem here. This 66-year-old man has threatened a 38-year-old man. And, they might have some some certain private politics that they feel. Yeah, and they think, let's investigate this. This is going to cause reform problems. Be careful with that.
I mean, I don't necessarily believe that there are some sort of police conspiracy to investigate Lowe on purely political grounds, but just...
Well, we've shown that there is two-tier... You do believe there's two-tier policing?
Yes, I do believe there's two-tier policing. However, in my view... Look, I don't think the police are going to waste resources on investigating a member of parliament unless there was something there. I mean, if you look
They
at all,
waste resources all the time.
yeah, but if you look at all the people who they have been investigating, it's people who, in the grand scheme of things, they're not members of parliament. They're not up there, so
What's
to
the
speak.
difference?
I'm
What if there's but there's a lot of police who do not like to see this wave of reform support. This is a perfect opportunity for them.
Well, yes. Well, look. I understand that, but I think to basically imply that there is some sort of political agenda here from the Metropolitan Police, I think that is wrong. I think that is wrong because, there's no real evidence to suggest that. A report was filed by the party. The police are investigating. They have due process. Their investigation is ongoing. And look, for all we know, Lowe could be.
We have got evidence of this where we've seen people locked up for saying things that were not that bad, but because they were considered right-wing. And we've also got MPs, Labour MPs, who are making lies up about those rioters, for instance, this is not somebody that was on Twitter. This was an MP who said the rioters were throwing acid on Muslim women's faces. It was a lie, and it was shared around by other people.
A Labour MP said
A Labour
this.
MP. Nothing's happened
Wasn't
to
it
her.
Nick Lowles who said that, and then a Labour MP retweeted it? I think it was actually Nick Lowles from Hope.
Okay, but
that.
the point.
There was a
Okay,
sharing
but the
of
point is
information,
nothing happened to her. She still tweeted something, and she's not somebody sitting in their basement in Twitter. She's somebody, she's got accountability. This woman, come on, it's.
I don't think you're going to see eye to eye on this one. What I do want to ask you, though, is I asked Lee Harris, who was on last week, the same question. If you're Rupert Lowe, and it is genuinely you've been contacting Nigel Farage because for whatever reason they're supposedly don't get on. Again, I don't know that for fact. But you're asking Nigel Farage for dinner and you're getting told no, or there's no response. What do you do to get Nigel's attention? What do you do? Lee's response to me was, well, I wouldn't go and give an interview in the, I believe it was in the Guardian. He wouldn't have done that. What would you do if you're Rupert at that point? You're in a party of 5 MPs. You're trying to get your leader's attention. I mean, I'd like to think 5 MPs, they'd talk on a weekly basis at the least. What do you do in that position?
Quite frankly, I would have sucked it up. I thought Rupert would have seen past his own ego and basically realised, we have a bigger mission here. There's more important things going on than me not being able to have dinner with Nigel Farage.
So he supposedly wanted the dinner because he wanted to understand where the party was going. I'd like to have thought that Rupert would have understood beforehand because he's an MP for the party. Kezia, what would you have done in that position?
You have to remember that these 5 MPs are not. I met them. and I've met other MPs from other parties. When I meet other MPs, they're like watered down versions of human beings. These were real people. I liked all of them. And they were really they were characters also. And you have to remember, they're a little bit mavericks, and that's why we like them. That's why they're going to get stuff done reform. So, okay, yeah, he's not being as professional as he could be, Rupert Lowe, but that's kind of part of the charm of reform. You've got these characters in here who really believe in things. So, yeah, if he went for a kind of unorthodox way to go and get Nigel Farage's attention, fully.
Do you agree that he should have done the interview? Do you think that was a mistake?
Yeah, probably shouldn't have gone that far. Yeah.
Okay.
Shouldn't have gone that far.
Before we wrap up the program, Rachel Reeves, shock, has another scandal across her desk. Sabrina Carpenter tickets this time. She was given some free ones after she wanted to buy tickets, supposedly, was told security would not have been possible for her, and she needed, obviously, the highest level of security. Obviously, there's a wider thing here. Taking something for free when it's given to you isn't an issue. We know that. But the issue, I think, that most people have is the fact that these MPs who are cutting people's money, who are making businesses fire people because they can't afford them anymore, laying people off, giving money to foreign countries, but cutting our pensioners' fuel allowance, are taking free stuff. And it's not just a seat in a stadium, it's hospitality. There is a moral issue here, am I right?
The biggest issue here is that we've got these middle-aged women going to
Sabrina Carpenter.
No, it's really, and then I saw middle-aged men,
Taylor Swift.
going to Taylor Swift. One ick. That's like the biggest ick. That's the issue here, not the freebies.
Well, I am not a fan of Sabrina Carpenter or Taylor Swift. I've never listened to any one of their songs. I do find it rather...
You look like a Swiftie. I'm quite surprised.
I look like a Swiftie. Oh my
No, you really don't. You look more like a sort of like, what was those Ace of Base? You don't even know who that is.
Even the implication that I'm a Swiftie, I have never felt this insulted in my life. But it's almost in a way, I mean, this is just Labour being caught out yet again. You'd think after the whole Starmer palaver with Lord Ali and the flat and the suits and the glasses and everything under the sun, they would learn their lesson. Clearly not, and this is Labour defined. They're never going to change. They're never going to stop doing this sort of stuff. And this is why come 2029, there is going to be a reform landslide.
Do you think there's a problem with them taking freebies as an MP?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I think so. I think they're exploiting their position. I think they're exploiting their power for, even if it's for tiny gains, they are still exploiting their power and their influence to gain freebies, because the average bloke would have to pay top dollar for tickets like that. Yet, because she's the Chancellor of the Exchequer and she's got security needs, they give it to her for free.
£900 these tickets were going for.
Whew.
Prior,
no wonder middle-aged people go. It's the only ones that can afford it.
Everyone else is paying for their shoebox in the middle of nowhere, right?
Exactly.
Yes, I cannot imagine spending 900 quid on tickets
if they
for
resurrected Michael Jackson, I wouldn't spend £900 to watch him in concert.
I'd spend £900 to watch them resurrect.
Yeah, no, that
would be quite something. I'll put that on Twitter to recoup my losses of ad revenue.
Do you think there's an issue with taking freebies?
There is an issue, but it's not on my priority list.
Okay.
It's they do it. Okay, people do it. Shouldn't be done. My goodness, we've got bigger things to focus on in this country than if someone's watching
I mean, this has come out quite quickly. The concert was a week ago, or just over a week ago. I mean, the previous stuff took a couple of years to come out. So, yeah. I mean, scrutiny, MPs being more open, is that what we want to see? Or do you think she was just caught? And
of course, it's just like, it's a distraction though from like things that are really ruining this country, my future and my children's future. So yeah, in a nutshell.
I think it's a little thing. Don't get me wrong, it is a little thing. However, these things do snowball, and this will form part of the reason why people go to the polls in 2029 and vote for reform. In my view, it's a little thing, yes, but these little things do add up.
Nick, where can people find you online?
They can find me online on Twitter at Nicholas Lissack, and that is primarily where I am. I used to do TikTok, not anymore though. So Twitter.
Not the dancers, though, right?
No, never the dancers, never the
Taylor
dancers.
Swift, Sabrina Carpenter.
Maybe I should return and do that.
Ace of Base.
But yeah.
Kezia, where can people find you online?
Website is kezia-noble.com, and my Twitter X handle is kezia_noble.
And where can they purchase this best-selling book?
Amazon and all good bookshops.
All good ones. Otherwise, if it doesn't have it, it's not a good bookstore.
Are there any bookshops left?
Yeah, don't worry, it's a mess of things on the brinks, isn't it? Unfortunately, that is all we do have time for today. So thank you to our guests. We've got for an awful lot. Some things we agreed on, some things we didn't. So thank you to Kezia Noble and to Nicholas Lissack. Remember to join me next time right here on InFocus on Quews News.